questions about modern monetary theory that have come to us from our Patreon community of supporters. This idea, this new way of thinking about money and its role in the economy, has been developed in recent years by a number of economists, a good number of whom were concentrated at the University of Missouri in Kansas City, which is really where I first encountered it, and I've been reading about it ever since. Money has always been a big problem for economics. It kind of is a mystery, and it doesn't work quite the way you often think of it. And so a lot of economics has avoided talking about money in the hopes that somehow by talking about production of goods and services and the exchange ratios among them, you wouldn't have to worry about money. There was even a phrase in economics called money is just a veil, that the reality of the economy is what you want to see through the veil or around the veil. Don't get caught up in the veil. The person is behind it. The economy is behind it. Well, slowly over time, it has been understood, I think, by most economists that money is just as real as everything else. Money has impacts. What happens in the world of monetary exchange affects the world of production and the distribution of goods, that you have to take money very seriously. And not just the old money, the gold and silver, the hard stuff, but particularly the dominant form of money nowadays, which is paper money, and more recently, electronic money, money that really only exists in electronic accounts. And here's where modern monetary theory has made a major and important contribution. Once money is simply an accounting mechanism, a bunch of electronically created accounts that the government can create or that every private bank can create, it begins to make money interact in different and new ways with the economy. Let me be very concrete with you. It used to be thought in many areas that the only way money really gets created is in the end by the Federal Reserve here in the United States. That when the government borrows money, it prints up securities that are called U.S. Treasury securities. Those are sold to the public. And then along comes the Federal Reserve and can buy those securities from the public with what? With newly printed money. Wow, that's how new money gets into the economy. The Federal Reserve prints it up, which it is allowed to do as it sees fit, and uses it to buy Treasury securities from the public who got them by lending to the government. Notice that the money is dependent on the debts that the federal government incurs. And likewise, if there's too much money in the economy, the Federal Reserve sells back to the public the Treasury securities it bought earlier, pulling that money out of the economy and then neutralizing it by not letting it circulate. And then banks were understood as using these monetary units created by the Federal Reserve as the basis for what they could do in the way of moving the money around. What modern monetary theory does is show that this is not accurate, is not correct, that banks, in fact, when you borrow from them these days, they simply create an account for you. They hit a few buttons on a computer, and suddenly you've got $50,000 in your account to play with because they've given you a loan. And since the government requires them to keep some money back as a deposit, they credit your account with so many deposits of it that can't be lent out while you're using your money. And so the whole thing becomes an accounting mechanism. Why is this important? Well, probably the most important lesson drawn by modern monetary theorists from this is that we're not dependent for a full employment economy on having deficits by the government using up Treasury securities that are sold to the Federal Reserve. We don't need all of that. If we need an economy to be working more, hiring more people, producing more goods, simply create the electronic accounts on the part of the government, on the part of private individuals, however you want to do it, and then the money will be there, the deposits will be set aside to cover any demand for that money back by the people who've been given the loans, and then we can have as much money as we need. We don't have to suffer economic downturns. We don't have to suffer recessions and depressions. When there's too much money, the government's taxing capability simply pulls that money out of the economy. Likewise, banks can pull that money out. And so the whole notion of us being dependent on the government's debts and deficits in order to manage our economic affairs is not correct. That money makes it easy to do that once we understand how fluid the creation and input of money into the economy and withdrawing it can be. So modern monetary theory reaches the conclusion that we are much more able to manage capitalism's ups and downs by understanding how money works than we thought we were. And the excuse for conservatives not to use money to keep us at full employment has been given a heavy blow, and the kind of liberal Keynesian better management approach has been given a big assist by this new understanding of how money works. But, small but at the end, this is not about transforming an economy from capitalism to something else. It really has very little to do with that. That's a whole nother question for which modern monetary theory really doesn't have a great deal